Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Kuf Ayin Dalid in Bava Basra. We're holding on the fifth line on Kuf Ayin Dalid. Omar Afuna. Helveya Bani Arif. If a man says, a guarantor says, listen, lend him money. He tells the malva to give to the lova, lend him $100, and I'll be the guarantor. Or Helveyu Bani, lend him the money, and I'll pay you back. Helveyu Bani Chayav, and I will be liable. In all those, or halveo va'ani no saying, or the girsa can be attain, okay, and I will give. Kul Lashon Reva said, in all these cases, he tells the malva, lend him money. That means to say that he's the low, give him money. I'll be responsible if he doesn't pay. That's what an Arav is. An Arav is a person who guarantees the payment if the lova cannot make payment for whatever reason. Okay. Let's say he says 10 lov ani kaplan. He doesn't use lashon of lend him money. He says, give it to him. I'm telling you, it's like me. I'm telling you what to do. You're my shliach. Give him money, and I will accept responsibility. Or 10 lov ani pareh. Give him money, and I will pay you back. 10 lov ani chav, and I'll be liable. 10 lov ani attain. That's lashon kablanis. What is the difference between a kablan and an orev? Both of them are called guarantors, but in the case of the kablan, we said that he said he can go after either one, and that means to say, even it is even if we said yesterday at the end of the daf, Shmuel says no, you should never collect from the kablan if the lova has assets from the guarantor. The Tanakama said no, and orev you first have to go after the lova. If the guy is a kablan where he accepted full responsibility, right? Then Imam al Menashe Ephraim Mimisha Erza, he can collect from the Arav. When is that? If he doesn't have any asset lova, that's when an Arav, right? That's an Arav. The kablan, if he didn't say it, he said the end of the daf. You say Arav from the Arav. Imam al Menashe then he can collect. I'll collect from wherever I want. Then he can collect wherever he wants. That's if the lova doesn't have assets. But if he has assets, you should go after the lova first. A kablan, even though the lova has assets, you can collect from the kablan. That's to say, I take full responsibility. You can go after him first. That's what the Tanakhama said, and that's what we're saying now too. If you said a lashon of arev, then you first have to go for the lova. If you said a lashon of kablan, then you're a kablan. Now the Gemara asks, "But cool lashon kablan is saying boilu." So it depends. According to what we said so far, if you use a lashon of lend him money, then you're an Arav. If you say give him money, then you're kablan. So the Gemara asks you, boy, let's say you mix them both. Let's say you said Hilveya Vani kablan, lend him money, which sounds like I'm only an Arav, a guarantor, not a kablan. But he said Hani kablan, or 10 lo give him, which is like lashon of kablan, Vani Arav. Or Rav Yitzchak. So Rav Yitzchak says lashon Arav. If you use lashon of Arav, you're an Arav. Lashon kablan is kablan. So no matter what you said, whether you said 10, or whether you said lend him money, if you said Arav, you're an Arav. If you said a kablan, if Chizis says no, kun lashon kablanas. All these lashonas are acceptance, kablan. I take full responsibility. You can come after me first. Bar milve'avanev, unless he says lend him and I'll be a guarantor. Then you're an Arav, meaning you have to go after the lova first. If you're a kablan, then you can go after the kablan first, whichever you want. Rav Amar, kun lashon Rav is saying they're all lashon of arevut. Everything is arev. Whether you said arev, whether you said anything like tenlo, whatever. Bar mi tenlo vani no saying. If you say give it to him and I will give, and Rashbam says certainly if you said tenlo vani kablan, right? Rashbam says bar no v'emli or the keep v'rabam relation and afilu veu bar mi netem v'kolshkein tenlo vani kablan. If you said give him and I will give you, then you're a kablan. And certainly if you said, give him and I will be a kablan. And Rashbam says, V'kaimelon karava. I'm reading Rashbam, Divrei Maskal Barmi Tenlo Vani Nosen Lo. In my Gemara, it's right below the Bach on the side of the Gemara. And he says, so according to Rava, we pass like Rava, you're always an Arav, meaning you have to go after the lova first. You can't go after the malva has to go after the lova first, not after the guarantor. Unless the guarantor said, give him, that means you're doing my bidding. Give him and I will give you back, or I will be a kablan, then you're a kablan. So Rashbam says, we go on, v'dafke ten lo v'ani no say, the shneim lashon matana. Umash bekablana sheba oso shesivo limsolo lekibelo paro sheba oso lashon sivo limsol lezeh kibelov lepari. So in this lashon he says, you give him and I'll give you back. That's clearly he was a kablan. He didn't say go after the lova first. Give him and I will give you back. As if he accepted it directly from the malva. Give me the money and I will owe the money to you. Right? The arvus lo yifra min ha'arav tchila element alova. Kablanis measure years yifra karabanan demasisin. Avalim nosam nosam biyad ein l'malva alova klum. This we'll see in a minute. We'll see it from the next line. I'll explain that in a minute when we get back in the Gemara. So Rava back in the Gemara, Rava Amar Kul Lashon say Barminos Peten Lavani no saying. So you're always an arv, meaning you have to go over the love first. But if he says, give him the money, the guarantor says, give him the money and I'll give you back the money, then he's a kablan and you can go after the kablan even if the lova has money. Amalei Mar Bar Ameimer Ravashi. Mar, the son of Ameimer, said Ravashi, this is what my father Ameimer said. Ten Lavani no saying. If he says, give him the money, the guarantor says to the malva, give him the money and I will give you back. Ein la malva ava lova klum. Then the malva has no claim against the lova at all. That he's only against the kablan. Lo, that's not the case. The halacha says, lo mifta lova minei malva. The lova is not absolved of responsibility unless the guarantor takes the money from the malva. He takes the money from the malva and he gives it to the lova. So then, when he took the money directly from the malva, then he's responsible to the malva. Then the lova can't even. He's out of the picture. It's like I borrow money from you and give it to him. I'm responsible to you. Not you can't go after him. So that's the same way here. So again, what do we come out with? If you're an orev, which means according to Rava, any lashon that's not give him and I will give you back, or give him and I will give you a kablan, you're an orev. You have to go for the lova. You have to go after the lova first. Only if the lova has no money, can't pay whatever it is, then you can go after the guarantor like we have today in common law. Okay? If he said, ten lovani no sen or ten lovi kablan, then you can't go after, then ten lovani no sen, then he's the kablan, you can go after either one. If he said, if the guarantor actually took the money from the malva, he took it from him, and he gave it to the lova, then the malva only can go after the guarantor. He can't go after the lova at all. That's how we paskin. Now some cases here. Ha'udayona. Listen to this. A dayan, it was a judge who ruled that the malva can go after the assets of the lova without even asking for money. You owed me $100, right? And I know you have property. I didn't even go bother asking you for the $100. I went and grabbed your property. And a judge allowed that. A judge allowed a certain malva to go seize the property of the lova before he even asked lova for the money. Rav Chanin Bereid Raviva saw this and he removed this judge from office. Salke Rav Chanin Bereid Raviva, he's removed from office. That was an improper judgment. First, you have to go after the lova and maybe he'll pay you back. In other words, what's the point over here? Your property is your guarantor. Just like a man could be your guarantor, your property, which is mortgaged, the loan, that's your guarantor's hers. So what's the rule with the guarantor in Aref? You have to first ask the guy for the money. If he doesn't have money, you can go after the guarantor. You're not supposed to go to the guarantor before, only after the lova can't pay. Who is so smart to do this thing, to remove this bad judge from office, except for him? Your assets, your property, in Marvin. They are your guarantors. We learn our Mishnah said, if you borrow money, if you lend money with a guarantor, you shouldn't go to the guarantor first. Shouldn't go to the guarantor. What do you mean shouldn't go to the guarantor at all? We thought you can't go to the guarantor. So what's the point of guaranteeing if you can't go to the guarantor? We said yesterday's Gemara, you shouldn't go after him first. So here too, your property is your guarantee, your guarantor or your guarantee, however you want to look at it. You guarantee. You first have to ask you for the money. If you can't go, then you go after his property. Otherwise, you can't go first. So therefore, this man was removed from office. Now we're going to talk about several cases where an Orev was a guarantor for a man who died. The Malva had money to the Lova. The Lova died. Now he died. What happens when you die? You're asked to go to the children and their children, young children. So here, Ha'u Arva Diyasme, he was an Orev for these Yisomim. Means he had been an Orev for the father. Now that the father was dead, he was an Orev of the Yisomim. They were little children. And what did he do? Depart the Malva. he paid off the malva right away. So the kids are little, I'll pay off right away. The party the malva makamed lo yedin lo yasmi. He didn't even inform the yisomim, the children, that they had to pay. There was a loan to pay. He knew about it. The children were young, so he just paid him off. He paid off the malva right away. Again, you first have to go over the lova, but he didn't. He was an arvin. He paid him off right away, and now he came to collect from the yisomim, from little kids, 10-year-old kids. He came to collect from them. Amar Papa, well, you can't collect from them now. Let's say they're not bar mitzvah. Priyas bachov is a mitzvah. Paying off a loan is a mitzvah. If you ask me, labnei mitzvah can't do mitzvahs. They're not responsible at this point. So therefore, you can't make your demand on the children. Again, understand the case. A man died, had an orev. Now he left children. The orev went and paid off the loan. He didn't say, listen, wait till the children get older. He paid it off right away. And then he asked money from the children who were 10 years old. So Rav Papa said, well, you can't ask money from them. They're not mechuyev to pay up back the loan yet. They're children. They're not mitzvah. Rav Shapiro said the reason you can't collect the money from now is maybe they'll have an answer when they grow up and they're able to, when they're 13 years old and they're able to, they've learned a little Gemara, they know how to argue and defend themselves. They'll say, listen, why did you pay off the loan of my father? Maybe my father left money. He left a bundle. He had a deposit that he left there at the bank for the malva. Maybe he paid it off already. What was your business? What business did you have paying off the loan without even coming to us first? Should have come to us first. We were too little. Wait till we're bar mitzvah. Maybe the father left money. So therefore, both Rav Papa and Rav Huna say that you can't collect from these yisomim right now. Number one, the Rav Papa's reasoning is they're children. They're not the mitzvah. Pardon?
There's a guardian.
Let's assume there was no guardian. Even if there was a guardian, the guardian would argue on behalf of the children that you can't claim anything from the children yet because they're children. They're not bar mitzvah yet. There's no guardian here. The guardian has no business. If there was a man who was a guardian, was taking care of their business, fine. But there was no guardian here. He was a guarantor for the father's loan. Now he was a guarantor on this loan. This loan now fell to the children, and he went and paid it off before even asking the children about it. So now he wants to get paid. He paid them off, and then he paid off because I'll take care of him. And then he goes to the children. So Rav Papa says the children are little children. They have no mitzvah to pay yet. Rav Huna says he can't pay them because maybe the father paid off the loan before he died, and you don't know about it. Maybe they'll argue that when they're bar mitzvah. So they both say that at this point, the Arif cannot go after the children while they're young children. But one reason is because they're young and they're not mechuyev mitzvah. One is because maybe the father paid them off, and when they get older, they'll go through the papers and they'll see maybe the father left word that he had paid him off. What's in both these reasons? Both reasons we say the Arif cannot go after these 10-year-old children. Let's say before the man died, before he died, he said, oh, by the way, I owe money. I owe that money. So now you don't have to worry that maybe he paid it off, because he said when he died, he said I haven't paid it off. So according to Rav Huna's reasoning, they could collect now from the children because the father admitted before he died that he hadn't paid it off. According to Rav Papa's reasoning, that their children, you still don't have to pay them until they're bar mitzvah. Or he was put in chayim for not paying his loan. And it was the court with the malva had taken the lova before he died to court, and they put him on. They refused to pay, so he was in chayim, and he died while he was in chayim. So clearly he hadn't paid. So according to Rav Huna, you can collect now from the kids because clearly you don't have to worry. Maybe the father left money for the malva. But according to Rav Papa, you have a problem because they're children. Sholchum they sent from Eretz Yisrael shamtu umeis b'shamsei. In that case, where he was put in chayim for not paying and he died in that state. That you can collect from the children even though they're 10 years old now. What's the whole reason why you can't collect them? Because maybe when they're older, they'll argue, maybe the father paid off the loan. Here it's clear he didn't pay off the loan. Meisvei. An Arav who had the shtar milva, the loan document, the IOU in his hand. Ain't a go, he can't collect. In other words, what is he doing now? He says, I paid off the loan for the children. And he's coming to collect now. Come up children, you can't collect. Why? Well, why can't he collect? We're saying now because it's not clear why he says he can't collect. Ain't go rushes until the Yisomim get older. Right now they're little children. Im Kosovov, let's say the IOU says probably it's signed by witnesses also that the Malva wrote his Kabalti Mcha. He gave him like a receipt. On the star, he wrote, here's a receipt, I agree that I paid you. And Adam signed, etc. He has a receipt. Then he could collect. So Bishlam, Rav Meir Shapiro, according to Rav Meir Shapiro, how could you collect? Before the guy died, he was motivated that he owed the money. How can you collect from the children? They're still children. Even if the Orev is backed up by a receipt. He says not only did he go and pay off the loan, but he has a receipt that he paid off the loan. They wrote on the star, like you mentioned the other day. Maybe you wanted to write on the star. You could write the receipt on the star, have it signed. Here he wrote the receipt. So why can you collect? They're still children. It's a shiny hasam. The lahachi tarch v'kasav laws kabalti. That's why he wrote on it. He had it written on that he had that I've been paid. Why? Because therefore he effectively has a star now. Now it's not like a milva al peh, a loan document, an oral loan that you can't collect from children. This is already like a milva star. And Rashbam points out, Rashbam divrei amaschil de lahachi kasav eskabalti dave orav muchsik b'shtar. The orav now has a star. Sheyesh lo aleim. He's got a star now. Look at this is like an IOU on the children. If you have a loan document, you collect even some. You don't say it's a mitzvah elachov. If it's a mitzvah, they're not bar mitzvah yet. But here it's an obligation. They have to pay automatically. So this is what Rashbam says. That's why he wrote Iskabalti, because now effectively the guarantor has a written IOU on the children. And a written IOU, you don't say, oh, it's they don't have a mitzvah to pay because they're not bar mitzvah, but rather they have a chov and they have to pay. Rashbam on Amaral, before we go to the next case, Rashbam explains that there's no machlokas about if you know that the guy didn't pay back the loan. He said as he died, he said I owe the money, or he was put in the chayrim and he died amongst the chayrim. So you know he didn't pay back the loan. So then you can go after the children. You can go after the children, according to Rav Shapiro, even though they're little children. He doesn't hold that this is a mitzvah of mitzvah. And he goes on to explain, like we said on Amid base, if you have a shtar chov, if it's not a oral IOU, you can certainly collect from children. But he said, this manaseh, collect from children even from metaltlin. Even though the general idea is the metaltlin, if some are not meshubah to the bachov, he said, Rashbam wrote, in his time, they didn't have a lot of land. In other words, maybe where Rashbam lived, in France or whatever, the Jews didn't own land. And if it was not Mustavra that they would have land to pay back, it was very uncommon. And he said, and if you don't collect metalflin, nobody will lend money to anybody. Because if you can't go after their assets, even their liquid assets like cash and jewelry and things like that, nobody will lend money. So he says, he says, the Rashbam goes on to say that even though it's not Meshubit, Bisman Hazeh, he wrote, Bisman Hazeh, Dinam Ligvos Metalflin. Bisman Hazeh, you do collect metalflin, because otherwise, nobody will lend any money. So Shalot Tidal Delis B'fnei Lova, and he goes on to explain that whole issue. Back in our Gemara, we're about 10 lines down on the page. Here's a case where a guy had lent money to some guy. Let's say maybe he lent money to the father died. When he lent money, listen to this. He had a Jewish Arev, a guarantor. A guy lent money to a Jew, and he had a Jewish guarantor. Now the Lova died. In the same case, the guarantor now is responsible to pay the guy, but there's children. What do you say? The problem here also, the Orav went and he paid back. The guy made the demand on the children. Your father owed me money, and we have an Orav over here. The Orav went and paid off the guy right away. Same thing. He paid off the guy, and now he's coming to the little children to collect the money that he had paid on their behalf. So, however, he paid off the guy before they made a claim on the Yisomim. He shielded the Yisomim. He said, okay, I took care of it. Now I'm Yafni Yisomim. Said in this case, even if you say what? That the children don't have to pay back. Why? Because your word, maybe the father paid it off before he died, right? And it's going after the children. The Orav says, I went and paid it. Maybe the guy is collecting twice. Maybe the guy collected from the father first, and now he's collecting again now from the Orav. So he says, even if you hold that you can't go after the children, because maybe when they get older, they'll claim that the father paid it off. He left them a deposit for the guy. Hanimil Yisrael. That's if he was Yisrael. In other words, if the lender was a Jew, maybe he paid him off. But by a guy, Even the Basar Arba, the guy always goes after the guarantor first. He doesn't even bother with that. The guy can go after the guarantor first. You're not worried that here you don't have to worry that maybe the father paid off the loan before, because he knows that since he had borrowed money from a guy, the guy's always going to go after the Arav. So he wouldn't have paid off the loan first, because he knows that the guy's going to go after the Arav anyway. So if he paid off the guy before he died, if the Lova paid off the guy before he died, he's going to give the opportunity to the guy to collect twice, because he knows he's going after the Arav. So here you know that he didn't pay it off first, and therefore you could collect from the children. You could collect from the children. Why? Because the father would have never paid off the guy, because he knows when there's a guarantor, the guy's going to go after the guarantor. Amrlei, so he answered him. In other words, Mordechai said this to Rav Ashi. This is what Rav Green said. He says, no, just the other way around. Amrlei Adarabba. Even if you hold, you're not worried that he paid him off. You're not worried, not concerned about that. Hani Mili Yisrael, that's when it's a Jew, when the Malv was a Jew. Avad Kachavim, but a guy, keep him in a bus, since they always go after the guarantor. Listen to this. What is a guarantor doing? Does a guarantor really want to pay off the loan? No, he's my friend. I'm covering for him. He's my son. He's my friend's son. I'm signing for him. He doesn't really want to pay. But over here, think about this, just the opposite. When the guarantor is signing on a loan from a guy to a Jew, he knows the guy's going to come after him first, right? He knows he's going to come after him first. Therefore, he wouldn't have accepted the Arabi, he wouldn't accept to be a guarantor unless the father gave him money first, because he knows the guy's going to come after him first. So why would I be the guarantor when I know I have to pay? I'm effectively the borrower. So he wouldn't have accepted unless the Jew paid, unless the deceased paid up, gave the money to the guarantor before he died. So there, in this case, he's certainly saying the opposite. The first idea was, you can certainly go after the children now, because the father wouldn't have left money for the guy, because he knows the guy's going to come after the guarantor anyway. So he wouldn't have left money for it. Now we're saying just the opposite. The guarantor cannot collect from the children, because the guarantor was probably paid up by the father before he died. Otherwise, he wouldn't have accepted to be the guarantor, because he knows that the guy's going to come after him. So two ways to look at it. So the Mishnah said, if a man said, let's say a man is an Arav for a woman at a ksuba. Now, many times you have that today. You have a ksuba and you have a few friends sign on it. We're going to be Aravim. Whatever you wrote in the ksuba, you're going to give him a few thousand shekels or 1,000,000 shekels or $1 million. They wrote in the ksuba, don't worry, if I divorce you or die, you're going to get all that money. And they have an Arav there. So Rav Shimon Gamliel said, if you're an Arav for an Isha in a ksuba, right? The Mishnah said, and her husband wanted to divorce her. Her husband wanted to divorce her. What do you make a husband do first? Make a netter that she can't forbid her from having any assets. Why? Because you're afraid that this chatan isn't koilo, and he doesn't have any money. And what he's doing is, listen, tells his wife, let's get divorced. I can't pay you. We'll go after the Arav. Right, you're going to get the 1,000,000 shekels that he promised at the chuppah a few years ago. You'll get the 1,000,000 shekels, and then I'll get married. We'll get remarried to you afterwards, and everything's going to be hunky dory. We'll get the 1,000,000 shekels from the Arav. We'll play a game and pretend to get divorced, so he'll have to pay you. Right? That was what Shmuel said. In that case, what do? You make the husband make a netter that she can't have any anah from his assets, so he can't remarry her. Because if he marries her, she's going to have enough from his assets. So in a case like that, if a ksuba has an Arav, has a guarantor, and the husband wants to divorce her, you make the husband first make a netter barabim, a public netter that cannot be revoked, cannot be annulled, so that she can't have enough from him, to make sure that there's no knunya. Then if he still wants to divorce her, you can divorce her. Then the divorce is meaningful. We're afraid they're just getting divorced to play a game. What's the problem with getting a divorce in a case like that? If he's a Kohen. Okay, let's see. The Gemara says this. Shumiel. Listen to the story. Moshe. We're at the two dots, almost halfway down the page. Moshe Baritzi was a man. He became an Arav for his daughter-in-law. In other words, he was an Arav for his son. Son was getting married to this girl, and this Moshe was the Arav. Rafuna the son of Moshe. He was in Koilo. He was a rabbi. He was poor, right? What's coming up? He's going to divorce his wife, get the money from Papa, right? Amar Abaya. So Abaya says, This guy's so poor. Why can't we? Isn't there anybody who can give him advice? Tell him to divorce the wife and get the money from the Arav who's the father, and then remarry her. Why don't you? Isn't there anybody here who can give him this advice? The nigger shall just let him divorce the wife. We'll go collect the money from the father, who obviously felt he didn't want to support his son in Kolel forever. He didn't want to support him. And now they're going to play a game on the father. Well, you're the Arav. He'll divorce the wife. The father will have to pay the ksuba because he's an Arav, and then they'll get remarried. Then take it back. Can't anybody give him some advice? He wants to be in yeshiva. Give him some advice. Let him divorce his wife. They'll get the money from the father, and he can remarry her. Amalei Rava, what do you mean? How can you divorce his wife? The Mishnah Shmuel says, in a case like that, he has to make a neder. He has to forbade her from having any enough from her. Amalei Abaye says, Atu called the Megarish B'Beidin. Megarish, you think that's fine. That's a nice halach. If they come to court, the court will say, hey, wait a minute, make a neder first. But you don't have to get divorced in a court. Today, just to make sure everything is kosher, then you got to go to the Rabbanut, or you go to a rabbi, you go to a bezin to make a get. But the truth is, if a man writes a get and divorces his wife in front of two witnesses, kosher witnesses, she's divorced. So he says, you don't have to go to a court. So maybe he won't make the netter. L'sofa Gloy Mills, at the end, it turned out the Koinu. Rabbi didn't realize that he's a Kohen. Won't help anyway, because he wouldn't be able to take her back. Rabbi Hanad Amrinchi, that's the saying goes, Basar Aniya Azal Yusa. Poverty follows the poor. In other words, I can't even give him the shtick because he's a Kohen anyway. It won't work. Why would Abaye suggest that? Abaye was a great rabbi. He's going to suggest to make this shtick to get the money from the father. What's an example of a cunning, wicked person? A person giving advice. Somebody before. Remember, we had that case where a man says, "I'm giving you the nechasim, and after you die, give it to Yankel." That's what I wanted to do. Don't give it to your children, but after you die, I want it to go to him. That works. But the guy that you give it to, he could sell it meanwhile. He says, look, after you go, when you're finished, when you die, give it to him. It'll go to that guy. But if the first guy sells it, he can sell it. Now, that's not the will of the person giving it, but it does work, But it's not a good advice. So Abai says that's a Russia. It's a Russia Aram. You're giving him advice like that. It works, but you're not a good guy. The answer is Beno Shiny, but Silver Rabbanan Shiny. Unfortunately, they have to have both these things. In other words, it's different if it's a son and he's a rabbi. If he's a son and he's a rabbi, then it's not such a bad idea to give him this eitzah, because if he's a rabbi and he's a son, maybe he should have helped him anyway. And you're not really trying to steal the money from the guy, this guy who just agreed to be the Arav. It's his own son. If it's a son and it's Silver Rabbanan, not such a terrible thing. But the fact is he's only a guarantor. We're going to see in a few minutes that an Arav Ksuba is not really Mishabit himself. Even we just said an Arav, we learned yesterday Psukim that an Arav makes a Shibut. He takes it upon himself, because why does he take it upon himself? That you trust me and all that. He trusts himself. Arav Ksuba, they're all a wedding, they're all dancing. Yeah. Make the shidduch and all that. He doesn't really obligate himself. So he's not Moshubat anyway. The father just wrote that, because let's go on with the wedding and let's everybody be happy and drink and collect the gifts and all that. He's not really Misham. So the answer was Kaplanu. He fully accepted it. He said, come after me. That's good if you hold the Kabbalah Ksuba. That it comes up. We're going to see this in this discussion in a minute. A Kabbalah of a Ksuba, even though the husband has no assets now to pay back, Mishabed, he's Mishabed, so he obligates himself anyway because he loves the chassan. Shopper, fine. So the father really was a proper kablan, and if the poor Chatan Rav Huna had divorced his wife, he really would have had to cough up the money. The father would have had to cough up the money. This Moshe. If you hold, we're going to see in a few minutes this Shiloh that the kablan of a ksuba, even a kablan of a ksuba, only obligates himself if he knows that the chassan has assets anyway. Okay, I know you have money, so I'll back you up. But if he knows he doesn't have money, he's not misham himself Michael and Maimer. So Iboy saying maybe Rav Huna did have assets when he got married, mishtabed, and they got blighted, they got ruined, they got washed away. He had some property, but it got ruined. Iboy saying a father's different. Normally, you say a kablan. Even a person who accepted himself to pay the ksuba, that's only if he knows that the father, that the chassan has money. So he said, I'll accept it if something happens. But if he doesn't have any money, what are you going to say? So one answer is he had money. It got lost, or he had some assets and it got lost. Or you could say a father's different. A father's Mishabed himself, because For his own son, he is Mashab himself. V'itmar, where did this Shabbat? Or of the Ksuba. Divrei kol Mashtabat. A person who finds that he's a guarantor on the Ksuba, everybody agrees he's not Mashab himself. It's just, at the wedding, he says, we'll see why in a minute. Kablan de Balchov, if he's a Kablan on a loan, Divrei kol Mashtabat, that's for sure Shabbat. What about a Kablan of a Ksuba, an Orav of a Balchov? He's a Kablan on a Ksuba, like this Moshe was for his son Rafuna, and an Orav of a Balchov. Pligas machlokas marsav, one says if the person who owes the money has assets, then mishabet, then the guarantor is willing to be mishabet himself, even an orav of a balchov or a kablan or a ksuba. Leslie, but if he doesn't ask, mishabet. No marsav ben isle ben leslie mishabet something of hilchasa. The halach is orav ben isle ben leslie mishabet. An orav is mishabet himself whether the person owing the money, in this case the lova, or the person who is who owes the right, in this case the lova, whether he has assets or not, is mishabed himself. Bar me'or v'ksuba, an orv is mishabed himself, whether the lova has assets or not, except the orv of ksuba. Why? Dafagav this leilabal, even if he has assets, lo mishabed is not mishabed my time. A mitzvah, I'm just making this shidduch happen. I'm doing a mitzvah, making a shidduch, right? The lav mideh chasar, and she's not losing anything. See, in the case of the malva, if the lova doesn't pay him back, it's going to be a loss there. So the Orav takes it upon himself. Okay, if the lova can't pay it back, even if he has no money, if he can't pay it back, I'll take it upon myself to make you whole, to make the malva whole, to pay him back. But in the case of Adisha, she didn't lose anything. She didn't give him any money. She's getting this $200 or the $2 million, whatever's written in the Ksubah, sort of as a gift, for to marrying the guy. So she's not losing anything, and therefore the guys are not really being Meshabbat himself. So therefore, the Arav of a Ksuba, everybody agrees, even if you're an Arav of a Ksuba, you're not really responsible. Unless you agree at Kablan that you say you can come after me first, then you're responsible, otherwise not. We'll leave it here. Because it'll take us into tomorrow's daf, and tomorrow's a longer day, so we'll pick it up from here tomorrow. And we'll pick it up from this line, 5 lines from the bottom page. Again, with this continuing with this discussion about Kaninyas and things of that sort. Have a good day, everybody. Colt.